Sash clamps are a workhorse of any workshop like this. I mean, almost all of my big clamping operations for tables and other stuff like that, big panels, it's done on sash clamps, all laid out on the table. All of my longest clamps are sash clamps, and most of them are just these, Torquata T-bar clamps. They're heavy, industrial, same ones that, they've been in workshops for probably hundreds of years. I don't really know, but I'm sure it's probably even longer than that. So they're fairly versatile. You've got a number of holes that a pin locks the tailpiece into. So you get that roughly where you want it, lock it in with a pin, and then you've got this really long threaded rod that clamps up and applies a lot of pressure, more than enough to clamp up any big, solid hardwood pieces. You can also use them for cabinets because they're nice and long. They're pretty heavy, but they're fairly versatile. One thing that I've found as a limitation is the pin sometimes falls out. Never in operation. Once it's clamped tight, pin is stuck. It's not going anywhere. But if I've just dominoed or biscuited a bunch of my panels, and then I have to move the clamps back into position, sometimes when I'm moving them, the pin pops out and my tailpiece is free again. So on bigger operations where I've got a bunch of glue in place and then one of these slips over and I have to lift all the pieces up again to get it back into position, that can be a real inconvenience. It has even led to situations where I've had glue go off before I could get everything clamped up. So, that's a real disadvantage and it can be a really tricky situation. These Bessey sash clamps use a slightly different mechanism that actually means you don't have holes and a pin. You've got a tailpiece which is infinitely movable just by using these spring pieces back here. It's just as solid, it's not going to go anywhere, but it means you don't have to lock in that pin and then adjust all of that threaded rod to bring it up to that point that you're looking for. So, you're going to pay more for this. It's a more expensive product. It's just as strong. I don't know the actual force that it can apply, but it's more than enough, more than you'll need. And the advantage is really that you can infinitely adjust that really quickly. You can lay it down either on top or underneath your panels, bring that tailpiece right into position without having to fiddle with a pin or applying extra chocks or extra pieces of timber. So that's why you'd pay more for something like that. It's a small change, but it makes a real difference in efficiency and just like the cleanliness of the process, just how easy it is to use. With all of these sash clamps, you've got a lot of bare metal and that's going to be in contact with timber and glue. So there's a number of ways that you're going to protect your timber surfaces. You can either just lay a sacrificial strip on each edge of your panel and that's what will take the bulk of that force coming off those metal plates. On some of my big sash clamps, I've just used double-sided tape and put a little timber chock on each one. It's on there permanently. That just means that I don't have to worry about it. It's also worth considering that the bare metal edge on both of these clamps will react to the glue and can sometimes stain the panel. So I either just use a piece of plastic, sometimes a piece of masking tape, down on that face there to protect it from glue. So the I-beam on the Bessey clamp is actually nickel plated steel. It's a small difference. It does mean it's a cleaner surface for gluing on, but long term, in many years, you're still going to have reactions with glue, so you're still going to have to take precautions because of that. Another feature that I do really like about these Bessey clamps is when you sit them down, they sit perfectly flat and parallel to the surface. The reason that that's different from a traditional sash clamp is the tailpiece on the sash clamp doesn't protrude below the bar itself, and I guess that's designed so you can slide it more easily. But what that means is that if your clamping head slides off the table that you're working on, which happens because of the force you're applying on a huge piece, this can tip over, which again can mean that your pin comes out. So you have to keep them locked down to the table. It has happened to me many times that it comes off. These Bessey ones, the tailpiece is flat and the head is flat, so even if your head pops off, you're still going to stay upright in most situations. So it's a simple thing, but it does potentially make clamping a lot easier. So you might wonder, Given that it has 2 screw holes here, why I wouldn't just screw it to the edge of the bench to prevent that falling off. Now that seems like a very logical solution, but the simplest way that I can explain that that doesn't work as well as it should is basically the holes that are pinned into these bars are not a precision component. So if you line up 6 of these sash clamps together, the position of those holes in relation to the position of the head are not going to be exact. What that means is that when you put that pin in each of those 6 tail pieces, you're going to need to tighten that head slightly different amounts on each bar. So you can't just put screws in that head piece in exactly the same position along the table and make sure it doesn't fall off that way. You need to bring this screw up to the face of the piece that you're going to clamp before you screw it down. So look, there are ways to do it, but it's not necessarily as simple as laying all of your clamps down, screwing them all down, and then putting your piece of timber on top. It just doesn't quite work that way. That being said, I have a bunch of these clamps and I use them all the time. I'm just aware of some of their limitations. And in looking at this, I can see, they've kind of solved some of those problems. And for a price, I could have that kind of convenience. One other small but useful design feature is that the double-sided handle on the Bessey clamp clears the table surface it's working on. Now, it seems like an obvious thing for a clamp. The way that the traditional sash clamp does it is it has a moving pin here. So it technically does clear the table, but it means you have to be moving it for that to happen. So it can get in the way, and again, that can hinder speed and ease of use. It's a simple thing, but you know, those small design things, they make a big difference in the efficiency of your work and how many times you whack your knuckles on the table, which, you know, that adds up. One of our other presenters, Phoebe, has done a great video on protecting your work and good clamping technique. You can check it out just up here.
Lay out more until I've got as much done as I can possibly reach on the sash clamp. So that might be 10 sets of legs. And then...
Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. You can check out the TimberCon website for more information or go in and chat to people in store.